Hello, I'd like to welcome you to the Revised Common Rule webinar series presented by the CITI program. Today's webinar is an overview of the revisions to the Common Rule. This presentation is based on the original CITI program Final Rule resource, Overview of the Final Rule Revisions by Gary Chadwick. The original resource in its entirety, including accompanying handouts and presentations, is available on the resources page of citiprogram.org. Today's presenter is myself, Margaret Rankovic. I'm the Associate Director of Educational Initiatives at the CITI program. I manage different content areas, including human subject research, good clinical practice, clinical research coordinator, information and privacy security, and IRB administration. I help develop the Final Rule resources and the Revised Common Rule course. Today's presentation aims to provide a comprehensive review of the revisions to the Common Rule, including describing the changes to each section from 46.101 to 46.124. I just want to note that this presentation is for educational purposes only. You should consult with your organization's policies and procedures. Let's take a quick look at the updates to the Federal-Wide Assurance, the FWA. Number one, the requirement that institutions designate IRBs on the FWA is deleted. Institutions no longer need to list the reviewing IRBs on their FWA. Number two, FWA holders are not required to routinely submit changes to IRB rosters. You're still required to maintain those IRB rosters, but you no longer have to submit the changes. Number three, FWAs will no longer require a declaration of ethics principles to be followed. And number four, the old footnote to the applicability section has been removed to eliminate the voluntary extension of the FWA to non-federally funded research. So this is going to preclude the checking of the box as part of the FWA application and to ensure that FWAs now only apply to federally conducted or supported research. So institutions may still voluntarily extend the regulations to all research conducted by the institution and apply consistent policies and procedures to all research, but this extension will no longer be part of the assurance process. So such research will not be subject to federal oversight. The intent here is to decrease administrative burden and to permit a flexible approach to overseeing research that is not federally funded. So a common logical question here would be, if you no longer have to submit changes to the IRB roster for the FWA, do you still have to maintain an IRB roster? And the answer is yes, the IRB roster must still be maintained. So what was moved from Section 103, which is now in Section 108, is the requirement to prepare and maintain a current list of the IRB members identified by name, earned degrees, representative capacity, indications of experience such as board certifications or licenses, sufficient to describe each member's chief anticipated contributions to the IRB deliberations, and any employment or other relationship between each member and the institution. For example, full-time employee, part-time employee, member of governing panel or board, stockholder, paid or unpaid consultant. So what was deleted was that changes in IRB membership shall be reported to the department or agency head. Moving forward, we're at 45 CFR 46102, definitions section. So what are the major changes to definitions? The definitions were reordered. They're now listed alphabetically, so it's easier to find. New terms were added. The three new terms added include clinical trial, public health authority. Other changes to definitions include intervention, interaction, private information, and identifiable private information got elevated to get their own subsection numbers, and they've been changed only to clarify wording. The other big one is legally authorized representative. Now adds specific authorization that you can use institutional policy when there's no applicable law that addresses this issue. So 46.103, ensuring compliance. The big move here is that the list of written procedures formerly needed for FWAs that was in 46.103 now appears in the IRB operations section, which is 46.108. This conforms to the placement in the FDA regulations. There's a little harmonization working there. And the FDA regulations there are 21 CFR 56.108. For the second big change here, for research that takes place at an institution in which IRB oversight is conducted by an IRB that is not operated by the institution, a requirement has been added at 46.103E to have documentation of the reliance between the institution and the external IRB, which allocates responsibilities between the two. So this requirement is more flexible than what was proposed in that Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, the NPRM. It does not require that the institution and the organization operating the IRB establish and follow written procedures. Therefore, compliance can be achieved in a variety of ways. such as through a formal written agreement, such as a reliance agreement between the institution. 46116B now lists the basic elements of consent. So there are no changes to the previous 8 basic informational elements of consent, but a new requirement was added. The new requirement states that there must be one of 2 statements about the collection of private information or identifiable biospecimens for future research. The statements are: identifiers might be removed and the de-identified information or biospecimens used for future research without additional informed consent from the subject, or the subject's information or biospecimens will not be used or distributed for future research studies, even if identifiers are removed. Finally, 46117 added a 3rd signature waiver category. Members of a distinct cultural group in which signing forms is not the norm and the research is minimal risk, and now there's an added category for them for a waiver of the requirement to obtain a signature. It is important to remember that documentation means obtaining the signature of subjects or legally authorized representatives on consent forms. The term documentation in 46117 does not mean recording that the process has taken place. This is a long-standing, unique regulatory use of the word documentation, which has caused confusion from its first appearance in 1974. So waivers of documentation only mean that no signature is obtained. It is still good research practice to document, i.e. record, occurrence of the consent process and that the subject agreed to participate in the research. So 46118 through 46124, these sections have remained essentially unchanged except for some minor clarification in wording. So those were the revisions to the Common Rule section by section. I just want to sum up this presentation. The topics covered today, we went over what is the revised Common Rule, why updates were needed, when did the Common Rule start applying, when was the general compliance state, what are the 2 sets of Common Rule requirements? Those are the pre-2018 requirements and the 2018 requirements, also known as the 2018 rule. And what about FDA-regulated research that's also subject to the Common Rule? It must comply with both sets of regulations, whether it's the pre-2018 or the 2018 Common Rule and the FDA regulations. And then finally, the presentation, a majority of the time was spent on what are the key revisions to each section of the rule. Thank you for attending today's webinar, and for more information or to check out the final rule resources on which this presentation was based, head to citiprogram.org.